Hello and welcome. So when you hear the term procurement, what's the first thing that pops into your head? Probably just buying things, right? Well, in today's business world, that's kind of like saying your smartphone is just for making phone calls. The reality is procurement has evolved into a seriously powerful strategic function. And right at the heart of it all is contract management. You can think of it as the strategic playbook for how a company builds relationships with its suppliers to gain a real lasting competitive edge.
So here's our roadmap for today. First, we're going to look at how procurement made the leap from a simple back-office task to a strategic powerhouse. Then we'll dive into the foundational rules, the what, why, and when. After that, we'll walk through the entire life cycle of a contract, from its creation to its conclusion. Then we'll get into the commercial blueprint, which is all about the money, and we'll wrap it all up with some core principles you can take with you as you launch your careers.
All right, let's kick things off with the big picture. What we're talking about here is a fundamental shift, a move away from the old idea of a purchasing clerk just processing orders to a new reality of a strategic business partner who's got a seat at the main table.
Look, in a globalized economy, you can't just place an order and cross your fingers. It's all about strategically managing the commitments you make with your suppliers, and that, in a nutshell, is what contract management is. It's the engine that makes sure those relationships deliver on their promises, protects the company from risk, and drives real value.
Okay, so now we get why it's so critical. Let's get down to the brass tacks. What exactly is contract management? And maybe more importantly, when do you actually need to go through the trouble of creating a formal contract instead of just using a simple purchase order? That's a question that trips a lot of people up.
The Association for Supply Chain Management, or ASEM, puts it really well. Now, the one word on this slide I really want you to focus on is proactive. This is not a set-it-and-forget-it activity. You don't just sign a document and file it away. It's a living, breathing process. It's about actively managing that relationship to realize savings and make sure performance is exactly where you need it to be from day one to the very end.
And that leads us to a really key strategic crossroads. You wouldn't draft a 50-page legal document to buy a box of pens. That'd be a colossal waste of everyone's time. So where do you draw the line? When is a simple purchase order perfectly fine? And when do you need to bring out the heavy artillery of a formal contract?
This slide breaks it down beautifully. A purchase order, that's your tool for straightforward one-and-done transactions. But now look over at the left side. This is when things get serious. When you need a continuous supply, when your requirements are complex, when you're sharing important information, when you're building a long-term relationship, that's when you need a contract. A contract is basically a signal that this supplier is now an integrated, critical part of your value chain.
Every single contract has a life of its own. It's born, it lives, and eventually it ends. And to manage it effectively, you have to understand each stage of that journey. We call this whole process Contract Lifecycle Management, or CLM for short, and it has 5 distinct phases.
And here's that journey, all mapped out. It all kicks off with an initiation. Someone in the business realizes they have a need. Then you get to the authoring and negotiation part. Once everyone's on the same page, you hit approval and execution. That's where you get to signatures. Then comes the big one, the long haul, ongoing management. And finally, you get to a fork in the road, renewal or termination. The really cool thing is that modern technology has taken what used to be a messy, siloed paper chase and turned it into an integrated digital process. Okay, now this is a point I really need you to grasp, because so many people get this wrong. Getting the contract signed isn't the finish line, it's the starting gun. The real work, the place where all the value is either gained or lost, happens in this ongoing management phase. This is where you're constantly monitoring performance against specific targets. We call these KPIs, Key Performance Indicators, and SLAs, which stands for Service Level Agreements. These are the promises, like 99% on-time delivery. This phase is all about making sure you're actually getting what you paid for.
At its heart, every contract is a commercial document. So that brings us to its blueprint, the financial nuts and bolts. We're talking about how we structure pricing and payments, because these mechanisms decide how risk is shared between you and your supplier.
Let's put this into a real-world scenario. Imagine you're managing a big project, and out of nowhere, the cost of a key raw material just skyrockets. Who pays for that? Is it you? Is it the supplier? The answer isn't a flip of a coin. It's intentionally designed into the pricing model you chose right at the very beginning. Choosing that model is a huge strategic decision because you are deliberately allocating financial risk.
This table right here is an indispensable tool. Let's zoom in on that third column, primary risk allocation.
You see, with a fixed-price contract, which is perfect for well-defined projects, all the risk is pushed onto the supplier. If their costs go up, that's their problem, not yours. Now, contrast that with a cost-reimbursable contract. This is for projects where there's a ton of uncertainty. Here, the risk flips entirely to you, the buyer. You agree to cover the actual costs, whatever they turn out to be. And time and materials, or T&M, sits somewhere in the middle, where you share that risk. The big lesson? The more uncertainty you have in a project, the more risk you, the buyer, are likely going to have to accept.
And here's the thing. It's not just how much you pay, it's how you pay. The way you structure payments is an incredibly powerful tool for shaping your supplier's behavior. A single lump sum payment at the end is simple, but it gives you very little control. Milestone payments, on the other hand, are fantastic for keeping a long project on track. But the gold standard really is performance-based payments. This is where you directly connect their compensation to the results that you care about. They hit the quality targets, they get a bonus. They miss, they don't. It's the ultimate way to align incentives. All right, let's bring this all together. As you prepare to go out into the business world, I want to leave you with 4 foundational principles. Think of this as your compass for navigating the world of contract management. These are the mindsets that separate the experts from the amateurs. First, always be strategic, not administrative. Your goal is to create value, not just process paperwork. Second, risk allocation is a conscious, deliberate choice. Your job is to place the risk with the party that is in the best position to actually manage it. Third, context is everything. There is no such thing as a one-size-fits-all contract. And finally, always adopt a full life cycle perspective. Manage that agreement as a dynamic relationship from the very first handshake to the final day.
So, I'll leave you with this final thought to take with you. As you move forward in your careers, when you encounter a contract, what will you see? Will you see it as a static legal document that just needs to be signed and filed away, or will you see it as a dynamic, living tool for creating value and building a real competitive advantage? How you answer that question will ultimately shape the kind of leader you become.